Hello and welcome to Hot Topic, where we discuss the issues affecting East Yorkshire and Northern Lincolnshire. Today I'm joined by three of the candidates for the Police and Crime Commissionership for the Lincolnshire Force. They are Daniel Simpson, an independent candidate, Mark Jones for the Conservatives and Victoria Ayling for UKIP. We did invite the Labour Party's candidate, Lucinda Preston, but she was unable to make it, I'm afraid. But those of you who are here, thank you very much for being here.
And thank you very much for the invitation.
The Police and Crime Commissionership is a very new office. It started, 5 years ago, and the turnout for the election for the original Police and Crime Commissioners was extremely low, less than 20% nationally, less than 20% in Lincolnshire. Daniel, I start with you as the independent. What are you doing to ensure that the office has a greater democratic mandate?
Well, certainly that in taking up that role, it would be incumbent on any new commissioner to be out and about amongst the public and the partners who would be working with him or her and businesses, and to actually take on board what they say. I mean, I'm quite clear what the role is, and that is to listen to the public, and on the back of that knowledge to then steer the budget to place emphasis on the priorities for policing which have been identified by the public as needing addressing. So I'm quite clear in that role. It's unfortunate the government has not seen fit to publicise the elections better than they have done, and for a lot of people out there, they don't really know much about the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that actually is a fault of government for not making that information more readily available to the public.
Well, Mark, I mean, if it's a democracy, it's our responsibility to know what it is we're voting about, I guess. But perhaps the office is just one that doesn't excite public opinion whatsoever, and maybe it was an unnecessary innovation in the first place.
Well, I would say it was a definitely needed innovation. When we look at the old police authorities, the average police authority got 20 contacts from the public a month. Now the average Office of Police and Crime Commissioner gets 7,000 a year. It's a significantly more democratic process. What I would say in Lincolnshire in particular, though, what we've seen is we've had an independent who maybe didn't have
Alan Hardwick.
Yeah, and Alan is a lovely guy, and I've met him several times, but had he known what the role was, which last time they didn't necessarily do, we would have maybe had some different people coming forward with different skill sets. And I think this time what we will see are some commissioners coming through with the required skill set to actually deliver not just policing, and I agree with Daniel partly about that, but it's also about commissioning services in victim support, crime prevention and other areas. You need experience in managing multi-million-pound budgets to do a good job.
But the experience in managing multi-million-pound budgets doesn't mean that you're going to get a bigger turnout at the elections, and
No.
thus a more legitimate authority in order to...
No, but certainly in my case, I mean, I've hand-delivered over 250,000 leaflets door by door. It's our responsibility to tell the public what we will do in a positive way for Lincolnshire.
Victoria.
Well, I believe that you have to go out and meet people. I have also delivered leaflets, but I've held a lot of public meetings, advertised them, and we've had a good turnout so people can come and meet me and my deputy and find out more about the role. I think a lot of the problem was that a lot of people didn't know what it did, the Police and Crime Commissioner. We've had one session now, so they're probably understanding a little bit more, but my purpose in having the public meetings as well as doing the leafleting was to explain more about the role. Now the other thing is there's also a lot of resentment, I think, because they feel that it's just another layer of government. In actual fact, it is more transparent and more directly electable, and this is something people are finding out at my meetings, but also that it actually in 2013-14 cost £170,000 less than the old police authority. So the more we get this information out there, the more people will understand and feel more inclined to realise that actually they can influence the quality of their policing by voting for the Police and Crime Commissioner they feel will do the best job.
Now, the name, the job title itself is a bit confusing. When we hear the word Commissioner, we have analogies with the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Force, who is a serving officer. The Police and Crime Commissioner is not a police officer, or American police forces, where the Commissioner is the executive head of a police force. Here, the Commissioner is not a police officer, is not actually managing the force, is running the budget and hiring and firing the Chief Constable, who is responsible for the policing. So is there not sort of an inbuilt confusion about the office in the first place?
The title probably is you're right. He is a commissioner of services, if you like, which support the office of holding the of ensuring that the police services are delivered efficiently and effectively, and part of that is to commission services which in areas for victim support and for the rehabilitation of offenders to avoid the repetition of crime in the future. And in doing that, he or she is also responsible for commissioning services to support those people who are taken into custody. Because if you look at the Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary's report, there are areas which the force has been need clear improvement, of one of which is the commissioning of services, the right services at the right level for victim support and people who are taken into custody, and there is a requirement for them to improve that, because part of the Commissioner's job will be to look at the reports that are done by Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, and whilst the Commissioner is not responsible for operations, if you like, all how the police service is conducted, whatever happens within the force, there is a cost implication, you see, and it's incumbent on the Commissioner to ensure that reports, he or she makes note of those reports and holds the Chief Constable to account to address the issues laid out in those reports to improve that efficiency and effectiveness.
We'll discuss the money in a moment, but before we move on to that, I want to just discuss the political aspect of this, that there is a party political element to these elections, and I'm not entirely sure what the distinctions are that different parties have a different attitude to policing. I would have thought that the idea that policing is a good idea is something that's going to get consensus across all the parties. Mark, if you could start with you.
Yes.
What is the difference between the Conservative Party's attitude to policing Lincolnshire than any others?
Well, what I would say in this election, first and foremost, it's about electing the most competent and able person to be the Commissioner.
So it's sort of a presidential election then, about the personality rather than about
the
any
ability
ideology
to
or
deliver. What we found last time was an independent elected who largely hasn't changed anything, and that clearly hasn't moved Lincolnshire forward. What I'm saying is that element, being competent, understanding how to do the job, is vital. Beyond that, what's important is the partnership working element. Now, you can't get away from the fact that in Lincolnshire, most councils, all the MPs and national government are all Conservative. It does not mean that you do what you're told as a Commissioner because there happens to be a Conservative government. What it does mean is I've got the ability to be able to work in partnership much more effectively than other parties or an independent, because I have that connection. Now, I know that some people may say, but I can rail against the machine. You can't. That's nonsense. Government is not going to bow down to
the connection between the party that happens to be in power nationally, then if one of the qualifications for anybody involved in local government is that they happen to share the views of the people in national government, then there's not much point in having local government, because you just have the same party
totally
at every level.
If you are a Commissioner like myself, I would be the kind of person that is a Lincolnshire first person. I'm born and raised in Lincolnshire. I care passionately about Lincolnshire. That is what comes first. It's useful to be able to pick up the phone and call a meeting with all 7 Lincolnshire MPs and say, what are we going to do about antisocial drinking in Boston? What are we going to do about antisocial behaviour? What are we going to do about rural crime?
Victoria's bursting to come in.
Can I come in here?
You can.
I'm sorry, I disagree. I don't think the police will be better off having a Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner. And we're going back to finances here. We've got 7 Conservative MPs, a Conservative-run county council, and Mark Jones is the finance folio holder for the Conservative-run county council. Despite all these wonderful contacts, we had a derisory settlement from the government that gave us £7 per head for Lincolnshire residents, £63 per head for those in metropolitan areas. It doesn't matter. They take Lincolnshire for granted. They vote Conservative, whatever happens. Therefore, we don't have to worry. Now, with UKIP, one of the things the government's terrified of is UKIP making a breakthrough in their strongholds to win parliamentary seats and other seats. I have no greasy pole in UKIP. I have all the advantages of being an independent. There's no political hierarchy. And at the moment, the government promised to change the formula for Lincolnshire.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Victoria. We'll come back in one moment. Please join us again in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Hot Topic. I'm with candidates for the Police and Crime Commissionership of Lincolnshire, Victoria Ayling for the UKIP, Mark Jones for the Conservatives, and Daniel Simpson, an independent candidate. So I think we just interrupted Victoria there. She was making a point. You were making a point, Victoria,
yes,
about the separation from not being climbing the greasy pole of your party.
That's
or
it.
anything like that.
We have no greasy pole, no hierarchy to please or be frightened of. UKIP, however,
let's just. I don't want to have a discussion about UKIP on a national scale. I want to talk about the policing in Lincolnshire.
The policing in Lincolnshire.
It's a little bit rich to say that there isn't any hierarchical politics going on in UKIP at the moment.
Well, look, all I'm explaining is this. In the Conservative Party, there's a greasy pole. In UKIP, there is not. We have elected councillors and we have elected MEPs. We put the residents first. Now, the advantage of having a UKIP Police and Crime Commissioner is that we are independent, we have no whip, but behind me is a massive lobbying force, which is UKIP, to embarrass the government in giving the people of Lincolnshire the money we deserve for our policing.
Well, it hasn't worked so far, has it? I mean, the government is being embarrassed in all sorts of departments, and it still isn't handing out the money. Sorry,
because we haven't had a police and crime commissioner from UKIP yet.
Well, the Conservatives have had 6 years to address the problem of funding for Lincolnshire Police, and it was quite clear at the last elections for the Police and Crime Commissioner that the people of Lincolnshire wanted a commissioner who has distance from the parties of government, and I see, as a Lincolnshire independent, I have that distance.
But Daniel, you are a member of a political party, aren't you? Lincolnshire Independents
they certainly
are a political
party. And we can go into that, and I make I don't have any issue with that. The fact of the matter is, Lincolnshire Independents, a group of people working throughout Lincolnshire, and they were quite clearly identified in the communities in which they work, that they wanted a commissioner who has that distance from the parties of government. And we decided that it was essential to have a candidate who can fulfil that role. Now, the role is quite, on the back of the last elections, the people who voted made it quite clear, because by the results, the two independents were way ahead of the political parties, and you've only got to look at the votes cast. The two parties who were identified with parties of government only managed to get 15% of the total votes cast.
Just clarify who the Lincolnshire Independents are. UKIP, UK Independence Party, wants UKIP to withdraw from the European Union. Lincolnshire Independence Party doesn't presumably want Lincolnshire to withdraw from the United Kingdom. It's not an autonomous
Lincolnshire Independents are Lincolnshire focused, and our interest is to further the interests and aspirations of the communities of Lincolnshire.
Mark, the point that your colleagues are making here, or your rivals are making here, is that it's an advantage not to be associated with
this role is clearly about making relationships and partnerships work. It's about getting the best bang for the buck that we can for the people of Lincolnshire. I do not believe for a second that anybody else can make a call today and pull together a meeting with all of our MPs to say, what are we going to do about these problems? Now, that does not mean that you are some puppet.
It's not happened.
It's not happened.
Because I'm not in the job.
We've had no money yet, but you are in the job as a folio holder for
and we got
finance.
an additional £7.5 million
It's a drop in the ocean.
to keep rural bus services going,
It's a
to
drop
keep
in
family
the
centres
ocean.
going.
Yes.
Well, but you wouldn't
Sorry.
have been able to deliver that drop in the ocean.
I think you would have
Yes,
found
but
that if UKIP had any control, we wouldn't be talking about £7 per head.
You're quite right,
For
we
Lincolnshire,
wouldn't.
we'd be talking about a hell of a lot more.
Not a chance.
Because the Conservatives
How much
take
more money has
the
Douglas
Lincolnshire-
Carswell got for his constituency?
You see, there is this aspect that there is this connection also with the fact you have a Conservative-run county council. Now, it is a fact.
It's a coalition-run council.
No, it's Conservative-run.
There are 3 independents, and you have a thing called the Lincolnshire Administration, right? The fact of the matter is, you could argue that the independents who are on there are basically Tories in disguise. Now, the fact that I'm a Lincolnshire independent
And the Lib Dems.
means, you know, I'm quite clearly not somebody else. I'm not an independent on a ticket who is basically somebody else. I'm a Lincolnshire independent. Now, the fact of the matter is, the Lincolnshire County Council is unable to set a budget this next year without making some serious
I could have sworn we were talking about police.
But the reality is, Mark has talked about in the past about having community constables. I don't know where he's going to get the money for that, because his office removed the £1.5 million for the support of the PCSOs, which was an agreement made in the early 2000s about supporting PCSOs throughout Lincolnshire by using the precept on second homes. Now, he's withdrawn that, and therefore the Commissioner, Alan Hardwick, this time round has had to take over £2 million out of reserves in order to keep those PCSOs.
Let's let Mark answer that point, and just should point out, Mark, that you're the portfolio holder for finance for...
That's correct.
County
I don't have an autonomous role of setting all the budgets independently. There is a council of people. However, if I can finish, the situation is that I feel it's absolutely abhorrent to suggest that I should abuse one position in public office to further my ambitions to be the police and crime.
That's not the difference at all.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
It's a partnership. The Lincolnshire
You are
County Council is a
suggesting
partnership.
Daniel,
that I should,
you've made the charge. Let's get the
I should,
defence.
in some way, make a wrong decision in county council with their budgets, because that would give me an advantage in this election. And I am not the kind of person that's without integrity to do that.
That's not the
However,
difference at all.
what I would say is that there was consultation with the Commissioner. He agreed that it would be no reduction in PCSOs, and there have not been any.
There has.
I'll come back
There
on
has,
you
but he's
with
had
that
to
one.
take that money out of
And
reserves,
Yeah.
which he will not be able to meet next year. Because
Well, that will
Her
be down to
Majesty's-
the new Commissioner
Her Majesty's
to sort
Inspector
out.
of Constabulary has made it quite clear that in next year's budget there will not be that capacity.
Yeah. They're not replacing PCSOs as they're retiring or leaving.
Well, that's a current Commissioner's decision. That isn't
because
our
there's no
decision.
money, and you took the money
What would
away.
your decision
true.
be, Mark? What would your decision be were you to be elected about the PCSOs?
The PCSOs form part of a network of policing. We've got the police force, which are
And I know what they are. What would your
We've then got
decision
the
about their numbers
PCSOs,
be?
and they need to stay. We also need to find new ways of working. The specials are underused, underutilised. We need to find new ways of working with those. PCSOs remain part of the forward thinking, in my view, for the police. We will not see PCSOs go. You cannot just lose that community link. Community links are vital for the future.
Can I just say, come back on that? There's been much play on the use of volunteers to fill the gaps that your lack of funding has caused. Now, when they did a recruitment drive for volunteers recently for 1,000 people, they only got 6
This would be
coming
the
forward.
independent commissioner,
No, wait a
not
minute.
me.
Yes, but you do the same recruitment drive. The problem is volunteers had a very valuable role. However, because of the lack of numbers, when they do recruitment drives, you're not going to fill the gaps. You cannot have policing on the cheap. And I'm afraid, with all your contacts, you've delivered nothing.
I'm not
and
in
you
the
will
job,
continue
Victoria.
to deliver
I'm not
nothing.
in the
no,
job,
but
Victoria.
you are in charge of finance at the county council. And if this is what happens
So
when
what's
you're
your
in charge
policy?
of finance...
What's your policy on the positive? I'm telling
On
you
the
what
positive,
my positives are. Where
I'll
are
tell you
yours?
exactly where mine is. That I would push for this new funding. We've been promised
That's
by
not
the
a
government.
policy.
It is a policy because your
It's a wish
policies
list.
are doing policing on the cheap, depending on volunteers, which will probably not come
So with
forward.
no more money, how would you do it?
I will get the money,
I think
but
actually
you cannot.
you will not.
I will.
There is clearly going to be the fact that to have a review of partnerships, which the Commissioner has been working with, and to see whether the outcomes of those partnerships are delivering. Because clearly, by way of the Commissioner's grants, which he gives to various partnerships, you need to be making sure that you're actually getting a result for the resource input. And there is another opportunity because the G4S service level agreement is up for a review within about 18 months' time, and there is an opportunity there to look at whether there can be any more monies saved in that area. And it is acknowledged that in future years the Lincolnshire Police will be a smaller force but better equipped. And it might be that somebody in the next period of time might have to make a decision between better equipment or more people on the beat. Now, the other aspect to this, at this moment in time, there is a requirement for police forces to have 90% of their capacity available for frontline services. At the moment, the Lincolnshire Police is running at around 83%. So we need to have a clear understanding of who is exactly available, the capacity available for frontline services.
I just want to clarify one thing, Victoria. What you're saying then, it sounds as if you, in talking of those efficiencies and those savings, that you've rather given up on the idea of getting any more money, of any extra money.
No, not a bit of it. Part of the Commissioner's duty and obligation is to challenge MPs and the local MPs and senior politicians to address this matter of underfunding, and also not only the underfunding for the police force, but also for victim support and also for rehabilitation schemes which support and prevent further reoffending.
Victoria.
Right.
So it's a big picture which they need to engage in.
Very quickly, Victoria, sorry.
Very quickly. Another way forward is there's nothing better than visible policing, and I don't think we should cut back on frontline policing. However, better use of the PCSOs, for example. At the moment, they are warranted nationally to actually do fixed penalty tickets for speeding drivers or drinking in public. Now, at the moment in Lincolnshire, they have not been given the powers to do it widely. Now, I would make sure, for example, to say to the Chief Constable, give them the powers in Lincolnshire to do this, which will actually help with policing.
I'll have to stop you there. I'm so
Okay.
sorry. Please join us again in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
We'll continue that. Welcome back. I'm still with the candidates for the Police and Crime Commissionership of Lincolnshire. Victoria Railing for UKIP, Mark Jones for the Conservatives, and Daniel Simpson, Independent, or Lincolnshire Independent. Sorry, Victoria, I keep interrupting you. You keep talking up to the breaks. I do apologise. You were talking about the role of the warranted, volunteers and special constables.
To use them better, to give more fixed penalty tickets out, because as we know, one of the best deterrents is to see a police officer or uniform presence. Why not use it more? With PCSOs actually being able to issue these tickets, they are warranted by statute to do this, but in Lincolnshire it's not widely used. They do not have the equipment. And this is something I'd be pressing the Chief Constable to actually do, and it will help with speeding drivers, public drinking, and all sorts of
Now,
offences.
look, candidates for this office across the country are saying that we want more bobbies on the beat, that's the way to solve this. But a lot of the research, a lot of the academic work on this suggests that policemen solve crimes and prevent crimes when they're indoors and talking to people, and maybe in an office, that just walking around the streets saying evening all does not really make much of a difference to the crime
I
figures.
would challenge that academic research because I'm
sorry. I'm not the academic who researched
I'm
it,
just
Victoria,
looking at what the residents want.
Yeah,
they want
but the
to feel
residents,
safe, and they feel safe if they've got a bobby on the beat.
The residents, with the greatest respect to the residents, are not experts in policing and don't necessarily know what they're talking about.
I'm listening to the residents of Lincolnshire.
You could have a policy about aviation in Lincolnshire, and I really wouldn't want to listen to the evidence, to the opinions of the evidence on how to fly an aeroplane, to the opinion of the residents on how to fly an airplane. I'd rather listen to the experts who've done the work. But you may be right or may be wrong. Academic
They're
work is always...
academics in the metropolitan areas, I'm sure.
Well,
Daniel.
When people talk about visible policing, it needs to be more than seeing a striped car drive past rapidly. There needs to be that engagement with the public. And in some ways, you could argue that the police need to become part of a community rather than just policing a community. Now, you made the point about a lot of the work can be done indoors, etc., right? Well, once again, in the Her Majesty's Inspector of Police report, it makes a clear indication that the Lincolnshire Police requires improvement in the way the quality of its crime investigation. It's very good at allocating investigations, but it's not actually good at following them through. And that's an area that needs to be looked at. That investigation
is not done by being on the beat, just by being visible on the beat. That's a different issue, isn't it?
Yes, but the success of those investigations clearly has an implication for what's going out on in the community.
Mark, Bobby's on the beat.
Bobbies on the beat are important.
Yes.
And I think what we do need is a structure of saying, well, actually, Lincolnshire's rural people will need cars to get around, accepted. But park the car and walk. You don't have to cover miles because you need to be near your vehicle in case you need it. But you need to be walking through the markets. You need to be going and seeing community groups. You need to be visible. You need to equally relate to the people that you're working for. And I say for because that is public service. That's what the police are doing. And I think sometimes that element can get lost. What we need to do is support the police in being able to do the really important things, which include neighbourhood policing, but equally our child protection, cybercrime, fraud protection, the huge raft of things that they're challenged with every day. But it's communicating to the public what these other things are that the police are doing in their name. Because often when you speak to the public, what you hear is, I don't see an officer. What that also means is, I don't know what they're doing. So we've got to address that too. When you look at retail crime, which is a huge problem in Lincolnshire, we've just had knife point robberies across the county very recently. That's the kind of crime that you initially make people feel better about because there is a police presence. They've actually made an arrest. That was because of the detective work that goes on behind the scenes. So it is having that dual approach. But fear of crime needs tackling, as does crime prevention. And part of that is visible policing.
It does. And you see, this is particularly important in rural areas because a serious issue in Lincolnshire is rural crime. And one of the things, if elected as Commissioner, would be to ensure that there is the allocation of officers and resources to deal with that rural crime, because the reality is...
We'll come to the sort of the tactical aspect of
Yes.
this in a moment, but Victoria, sorry.
Yeah, I'd go out there and listen. And if elected as Police and Crime Commissioner, I would attend parish council meetings, town council meetings to listen. And what I've heard out there, I'm not worried about academics and metropolitan places where they get massive amounts of money for funding. I'm listening to the residents of Lincolnshire. I'm also looking at common sense. Yes, behind the scenes it's important to investigate crimes. We know Boston is the murder capital of the country. That's not great. And I totally
And it's not true either.
Wait a minute. I haven't finished yet. However, to see a Bobby on the beat, a PCSO uniform presence on the beat, reassures people. They feel safe. Also, criminals feel a bit nervous about this and are less likely to commit a crime. It's not only a deterrent, it makes people feel safe as well, and it prevents crime.
Well, I want to move on to the specifics of the policing such a rural police area as Lincolnshire. Daniel, sorry, you wanted to finish off that
point. The crux
point.
of the matter is the job requires the Commissioner to get out there and listen to the public. From all, and then on the back of that, because the Commissioner holds the purse strings, right, and he has the capacity to control the budget. Now, clearly, a Chief Constable will have his priorities and he'll also have his national obligations to fulfil as well, right? But it's incumbent on the Commissioner to ensure that those obligations are not compromising policing in Lincolnshire, for which the public of Lincolnshire are paying, right? And there will have to be an accommodation, which, and as I say, the Commissioner has control of the purse strings, and he will, or he or she will, be able to steer the emphasis on policing, and that's purely based on the knowledge acquired from the public, partners and other stakeholders.
You've all agreed that it's important to listen to the public, to get yourselves out there and to hear what's said. So it's very good, lovely to hear that you all agree. It's the sweetest sort of political experience. But I'm trying to identify. I'm trying to identify what it is that distinguishes you, that differentiates you. And I'm trying to find issues where that can be the case. I think you all agree there isn't enough money, and that you've got to listen to people.
If I look at hair coursing as an example, which is a particular challenge in rural areas, some people who don't understand that may think it's just about chasing men who are trying to catch rabbits. It's not. They drive their vehicles across land, damaging all the crops, tear down fences. They often commit other crimes such as theft or violent crimes. So it is a significant issue in rural Lincolnshire. Now, I've met with the NFU across Lincolnshire to discuss their needs and requirements for that.
National Farmers Union.
Yeah, they were very, very upset by the cancellation of Operation Galileo and the disbanding of the Rural Crime Unit. Cambridgeshire have now brought their rural crime unit back together in response to that, and that is something that I would look at as to whether that's the right approach. But whatever we do, something needs to change, and I would make a top priority being the review of rural crime straight away and the tackling of it.
It is.
I think you've got to understand, though, you've got to balance that. And I was worried when Galileo stopped, because rural crime is a big problem, but we've also got problems in our town centres with public drinking and brawling, and people are frightened to go out at night. And that's also got to be redressed. Antisocial behaviour, which is why I'm very keen on zero tolerance to crime and antisocial behaviour. All crimes, no matter how small, to be reported and investigated, because at the moment a lot of people don't bother to report crime because they think nothing will be done.
But you know, zero tolerance has only been done once, and that was in New York, and they had 32,000 officers in New York. That meant arresting everybody for every tiny misdemeanour.
I think you've missed the point. We're not talking about arrests.
I'm not letting your words.
We're not
zero
talking
tolerance.
about arrests. Zero tolerance means that every crime is worth reporting,
No, it doesn't.
because the small crimes mean that bigger crimes are not going to be committed. Can I also point out that I've actually announced who my deputy is, which is Jonathan Ferrari, a very experienced London police officer of 22 years. I'm a barrister, as well as being in business, and can offer legal experience, but I also have behind me someone with serious operational experience with policing, and we make a great team. In fact, I think I'm the only team that can offer this amongst all the candidates, because I've announced who my deputy is.
Okay, well, you're rather forcing that issue, Victoria, but let's address it since we got there.
Yeah.
Everybody else got deputies?
Yes, yes. The gentleman that I have proposed and who has agreed to take up the position should I become elected, a gentleman called Professor Tony Brand.
He's not one of those academic types who does research, is he?
No. He has a wide
Metropolitan.
he has wide
One of those
experience
metropolitan.
in human resources, finance, and training.
And Mark?
Every police and crime commissioner I've spoken to that didn't have a deputy said it's their biggest regret.
Yes,
and certainly in a
that's very
county
true.
the size of Lincolnshire, if you genuinely want to get out there and listen to the public, you cannot do that alone.
Yes.
Who's
so,
yours?
I'm awaiting their confirmation, so it would be incorrect of me to say at this stage, but I've approached somebody that I feel has got the right skill set. I would give them two very specific roles. One is the overseeing and managing of rural crime, and the other one is community engagement, to make sure that we listen to all the communities across Lincolnshire. So that is what I want from my deputy, but let's be clear, this is about electing a commissioner who should be up to their job, not leaning on somebody else who's got experiences they can't bring to the party. This is about electing a person to do the job.
I can
Victoria, very
absolutely
quickly.
do the job, but I do feel it's important to bring some policing experience into the team, which I am doing. I would like to ask whether
You have to be-
the
you have to be quite-
is your proposed deputy
We'll ask
a
those
former
questions in a
policeman?
moment.
Yeah.
Join me when... Welcome back to the final part of Hot Topic. I'm still with the candidates for the Police and Crime Commissionership of Lincolnshire, Victoria Ayling for UKIP, Mark Jones for the Conservatives, and Daniel Simpson, Lincolnshire Independents. Victoria, you were just going to try to advocate the merits of having a former police officer on your team.
Not just former police officer, but a very experienced inspector of 22 years in London, who is now a local businessman and a Horncastle town councillor. Now, I believe I could do the job. Very much so. I can actually hold the chief constable to account.
When you were at the bar, were you practising criminal law?
I was pupillaged of criminal, but I decided to go into business after. So I've got the best of both worlds. And I'd like to scrutinise the G4S contract somewhat, because there are a lot of problems
Daniel
with that.
mentioned that a little
yeah,
earlier.
absolutely. And I want to scrutinise that, because I understand that the police are having to recruit people to fill the gaps. Now, that is not cost effective, but that's another matter. My deputy has operational experience. And I would like to ask, although we haven't got confirmation who the Conservative deputy is, I'd like to know whether they have any policing experience.
Well, Mark.
What I'd say is, firstly, it's not your interview, Victoria, but I will answer the question that's put. At this stage, it depends on whether this particular person accepts the post.
Have they got
what I would
policing
say
experience?
to you, what I would say to you is, if I could finish my point, I don't actually believe that's the issue. You are not there to be operationally in charge of police. That is the chief constable's role.
right.
Now, to be fair, the person that is your deputy may be an absolutely wonderful deputy. I have no issues with him at all. But it is you who will be the commissioner. So
Yes,
that's
and I
as
agree.
important.
It's unusual for me to agree with the Conservative, but we have to be quite clear. The role of the Commissioner is not to run the operational aspect of the
I
police
understand
force.
that
But
totally.
clearly, the operational aspect of the police force has costs, and where there are costs, then that is my business as a Commissioner, right? In order to get efficiencies. And when we get back to the business of capacity, we talked a little earlier on about policing rural crime. Now, one of the things you would need to be doing, and I refer to the fact that there needs to be 90% of your force available for frontline services, and we need to have the conversation with the Chief Constable. What does he mean by frontline service, and what actually is the capacity available? Because in East Lindsey, there can sometimes be only 2 or 3 people running the length and breadth of East Lindsey of an evening to police it. Clearly unsatisfactory. Now, how many officers are tied up in the bureaucracy of police? There is a partnership arrangement with which comprises of 5 police forces, including Lincolnshire, on the western side of Lincolnshire, right? Now, that partnership actually involves 1,400 police officers, and I'd like to know, because you can't get that information at the moment, what the contribution of the Lincolnshire Police is to that partnership in the way of manpower. And policing is manpower. And I have to say that if a decision came at a later date between equipment and manpower, I would largely take a position of manpower, because Lincolnshire Police is basically a poor police, and you cannot have aspirations to keep up with the Joneses of police state of policing. Really.
Victoria, before I ask you
cloth.
to respond to that, can I just, if your deputy is a former police officer and has the advantage of those experiences, were you to be elected to the commissionership, would you not expect to be surrounded by quite experienced police officers most days at work?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I don't believe in getting involved in the operational side, but having somebody who was a former policeman, a high-ranking one, who is actually also a businessman, is there to advise and help, and also deputise for me, say if it's a parish council meeting and there are several at the same time, to listen to the public. But also, let's face it, he would know which stones to look under.
Okay.
If we're going to be blunt about it.
Well,
Because I believe in transparency, and that's why I've named my deputy. I will be running the show. I would hold the Chief Constable to account. I will balance the books and use resources best where they need to be, but also try and get more money. I have my policies. However, to back me in this will be a very experienced former police officer.
Mark, go to that point about the manpower resources, manpower equipment, and how the application of those resources with a rural force like Lincolnshire. Equipment's got to be pretty important there, hasn't it? I mean,
It's hugely important. How can you send our officers out without the best possible equipment we can afford? It would be outrageous. And to be fair, this is where understanding large budgets comes into things. Because if you don't understand the difference between capital expenditure on equipment and revenue expenditure on people, then you cannot run this budget. You know, we need to be efficient in making sure we don't have buildings that we don't use properly. Then we can use that money to buy the equipment we need to get our officers on the front line. It isn't a case of one or the other, because they're different parts of the budget. So it's important to get somebody in charge of this budget that actually understands how it works.
You need to get to the
I
bottom
think
of
we
what
can
the
all do
assets
that.
are of the Lincolnshire Police.
Yes.
And those assets which you no longer need to be disposed of.
Well, again, we've come to some degree of consensus here. So let me just move on to a broader question about policing in general. One of the reasons that we have quite a high crime rate is because we have so many crimes. The more things you make against the law, the more laws are going to be broken. That's rather definitive. It's quite clear that we've lost the war, the so-called war on drugs. Why would you choose to waste resources policing an unpoliceable campaign? Victoria?
Right. I did quite a strong answer to the recent Lincolnite survey on what we all thought about legalisation of cannabis. I do not believe it should become legal. I think it's a gateway drug, and I also feel that the health problems caused by it, schizophrenia or other things, because it can trigger all kinds of mental illness, it'll be a disaster to actually make it legal. Now, we cannot police it all. We cannot police theft. We cannot police speeding. But why give a green light to some substance which cause more crime, could cause terrible health problems, especially to our young, and antisocial behaviour. I'm very strong that we should
Certainly
not...
cannabis causes antisocial behaviour in the same way that alcohol does.
Yeah,
So
but
I
it's a
think
gateway
people
drug,
just-
and the thing is, we've got alcohol, so why add another substance that's freely available?
Mark.
What I would say, drugs are an issue, and it isn't just about cannabis, although that's a very small part of it. Legal highs are a significant issue in Lincolnshire, as we've seen in the recent press, as well as Class A drugs as well. And it is important that the police help tackle this, but this is again partnership working with local government and other agencies to tackle that, because it comes back to the reoffending and blighting people's lives through crime. And it really is important that we spend our money wisely. Often mental health issues are led to from drug use, and again the police, 20% of their capacity is used dealing with people with mental health issues, not policing issues. So it's bringing all of these things together, and that is the Commissioner's role, to help coordinate these things.
Just on the
I'm
matter
not
of
in
drugs,
favour
Daniel.
of drugs being legalised, and I think we have to remember actually that very often that drug addicts are the victims of crime, and legalising it would not necessarily address the crime associated around drug addiction. And we need to work with those partners who provide services to support those people. And at the moment, it is fair to say that Lincolnshire Police, on the back of the reports about them, have been a little slow to engage the correct partners at the right time. And Mark is quite correct. There are issues around mental health, and I'm afraid in Lincolnshire, mental health is an area that is sadly underfunded, and the capacity to help those people with those issues and how we look after them in custody, because Lincolnshire Police does not enjoy a good report when it comes to the business
move on to one
of
final
looking after people with mental health
issue,
problems
Daniel.
Thank
you. I've taken the point.
Custody.
There's a possibility that there's going to be a mayor of Greater Lincolnshire.
Appalling thought.
George Osborne announced
Yeah.
in his budget
Appalling
speech. Strange
thought.
place to announce
Ridiculous.
it. There's also a possibility that the police commissioners might also take responsibility for the fire and rescue services. Good idea, Victoria?
No, because I believe that the police are very specialised, and crime and antisocial behaviour is a massive subject in itself. Equally, fire and rescue is very specialised as well. And I believe to merge it, which I suggest is cost cutting, I think we could look at some kind of partnership, but certainly not merging them. I think that would be dangerous.
Mark.
I think it's about partnerships where they work and making them effective, not forced partnerships. So, there is currently a transformational bid going on to try and join the control rooms together with police, fire and ambulance, and I fully support that kind of work, but not bringing in fire when it doesn't need to be now.
And very
There
quickly,
are aspects of it where, like your call centres and one thing and another, where there might be a case for it. But I am largely against blue light services being amalgamated under one umbrella, because they are specialities in their own right, and furthermore, it complicates budgets where the ring
Thank
fences
you
for budgets
all. We
would-
must stop there.
would,
Reach the end
be
of the
muddied.
programme. Please join us again next week for another Hot Topic. Join in the conversation, #Hot Topic. Email news@s3.tv. Until next time, goodbye.